Okay, I believe this is where we left off. We'll just start from the beginning. So between 750 and 500 BCE, the Greeks began to colonize around the Mediterranean basin and the Black Sea, which you can see is around the Mediterranean Sea basin right here, right in the Black Sea. And of course, the red shaded areas show you the Greek colonization. And there were some distinctive features about the Greek culture. The population participating in politics in the city-states, equality of all citizens before the law, active, regular participation in politics by most of the population, the extent of citizenship that varied, of course, depending on the time and the city. But there were some tyrants or dictators that emerged in some areas, usually supported by the poorer classes against the rich. And the two probably the most well-known city-states that you guys have probably heard of are Sparta. And their political authority is called the Council of Elders, and this type of government is called an oligarchy. And the other city-state is Athens. And they had, this is the most distinctive expression of political participation by any of the city-states. But there are some differences between Athenian and modern democracy. Despite these Hellenistic ideals and this flourishing of culture, there is a bit of a contrast. There was some rivalry amongst the city-states and constant warfare, really, because of the different forms of how they were organized. And the contrast between Athenian democracy and even the Spartan, military communalism is really illustrated, to the extreme. Most of the city-states were small, about 500 to 5,000 male citizens. And like the Persians, the Greeks were dynamic. They wanted to expand. And these expansive efforts came about in waves of migration as opposed to forceful conquest. And they spread Greek culture and language and architecture. And we looked at this map just a little bit ago so you get an idea of where they spread Greek culture and language. And the Greeks really pioneered some revolutionary political ideas, like viewing the individual as a participant of a larger state system. We talked about that in class. And that'd be a citizen. And many still have that view today, right? No one person is more important than anyone else or the group as a whole. And, as time went on in a lot of these Greek city-states where a lot of this warfare and rivalries existed, more and more of these men demanded political rights and began to challenge the elites or the tyrants, and that's how we get the development of Athenian democracy. Okay, let's now look at the Greco-Persian Wars. This is the fighting between the Greeks and the Persians. Okay, so first we have the point of collision, which was Ionia. And these are Greek settlements on the Anatolian sea coast. Just to give you a little reference, we're right here. Okay. And In 499 BCE, the Ionian Greeks revolted against Persia, because at the time they're under Persian control. And many of those Ionian Greeks were supported by the Athenians. And, so this area became a contested area where the Greek city-states, like I said, had been annexed by the Persian Empire, so they're under the control of Persia. And they revolted. They got some help from Athens, and the Persians wanted to punish the rebels and their supporters in the Greek mainland. And hopefully you remember when we talked about Persia today, how there's an absolute ruler that has absolute control, willing to crush any opposition or rebellions. So, Persia responded with expeditions against the Greeks in 490 and 480 BCE. And the Greeks astonishingly defeated the Persians on land and sea. Even the Greeks, I think themselves, especially in the beginning, didn't think that was possible. But they were victorious and democratic. And against all odds, the Athenians led a coalition of Greek city-states to victory. And this was really a source of great pride for Athenian citizens who saw their political system as a source of their victory, right? They're fighting for freedom, fighting for democracy. And as a consequence of the victory, citizenship was extended to some members of the lower classes who fought the Persians. And despite that, Athens then pursued a policy of empire building. So, and this is what's known as the Battle of Marathon. And like I said, fighting for those freedoms, their democracy. And this is really the first time that we see the beginning of this idea of East versus West. That as, in the years to come, centuries to come, dominates European thought. And some even see that as now, right? Greece represented Europe and freedom, democracy, republics, citizens' rights, and Persia represented Asian despotism and absolute monarchs. And so this is really where we see that division, that first division of the East versus the West. Caucasians and Persians. And it's carried on even into today. Now, this victory actually radicalized Athenian democracy. And that's because the lower classes received full citizenship, and that had never been done before. And this is a 50-year period of, golden age of Greek culture after the Persian Wars. And like I said, they went on this journey of empire building. This is the beginnings of imperialism for the Athenians. And democratic or not, empire building actually directly led to conflicts with other Greek city-states. And that's where the Peloponnesian War comes in. The Peloponnesian War was essentially a civil war between Athens and its allies and Sparta and its allies. And in the end, Athens lost and Greece, was exhausted, opening the way for Macedonian invasion. And that leads us to Alexander the Great. So Alexander, he's the son of Philip II. Philip II of Macedonia. Actually, he completed the conquest of Greece by 338 BCE. And so now, instead of a flourishing of those democratic ideas, Greece achieves political unification, but ironically by force. And so thus develops a plan for a great Greek expedition against the Persians. So Philip II invaded Greece because it was weak, had been fighting this civil war between Athens and Sparta. His son Alexander then led this massive invasion of the Persian Empire. And in roughly a decade of frantic activity, Alexander claimed numerous military victories, destroyed the Persian capital at Persepolis, and ventured even as far as present-day Afghanistan and India before his death in 323 BCE. So he created this massive empire that reached from Egypt and Anatolia and Macedonia and Greece all the way to Afghanistan and India. And I believe, I think there's a map, maybe a couple of slides down, and you can see how large that empire is. But he died in 323 BCE. Now, despite his death, the empire was divided into three kingdoms, ruled by different Macedonian generals. And despite the division, his conquests probably considered one of the most important in world history because of the creation of the Hellenistic era, or this Hellenistic culture, because of his conquests. So despite his empire breaking into several pieces, he opened the way for Greek culture to spread east. And Greek influences can be found as far as India. And it's really a dissemination of Greek culture throughout Asia and Egypt. And thus we see a huge amount of cultural blending between Greek, Asian, Persian, and Egyptian cultures. And I lost what I was going to say. Okay. Well, anyway, the roles of, okay, here I am. The roles of cities spread Greek culture, and even a library with 700,000 volumes was created in Alexandria, Egypt. And even museums were built where they really honored scholars, had them keep manuscripts and all kinds of artifacts and different things, and really encouraged education and learning and scholarship. And so he defeats the Persians, destroys the capital, Persepolis, and he's anointed Pharaoh of Egypt. He's the son of the gods. And so, and even the monarch Ashoka in India published some of his royal decrees in Greek, and even displayed a new style of art that showed a lot of Greek techniques. So here we go. Spreading of Greek culture. Greek became the language of power. Greek culture became the elite class of society. And that was all the way from the Mediterranean to India. And so with this large multi-ethnic population and numerous monuments, we see a flourishing of Greek culture, kind of mixed in with all of these others, but mostly it's the Greeks influencing others. Now, of course, some of those other cultures did influence Greek culture. However, Greek culture and even the city Alexandria in Egypt stands out as the symbol of the Hellenistic era. There were even Greek monarchs who practiced Buddhism. That's an example of Asian influences on the Greeks. But we see a massive sharing of cultures. And there was some ethnic conflict. But a lot of cultural blending in the Hellenistic era. Many Jews were attracted to Greek culture. Pharisees developed their own school system to kind of counter that influence. They tried to, like the Orthodox Jews, they tried to resist the Hellenization of their people. But, and that's what the Pharisees are, the Orthodox Jews. But the Hellenistic cities were even more culturally diverse than the original Greek city-states because of all the mix of cultures. They were not independent, but they were part of these conquest states. And like I said, the Macedonians and the Greeks formed the elite section of society. But there, like I said, the cultural interaction and blending was still possible. Hence the Greek leaders, some of them who did practice Buddhism. But this is, and at the end of this, the Roman world, the Romans are the ones that replaced the Greeks in the West. They were still part of that Hellenistic world. And the Romans, of course, a lot of their own ideas, and we'll learn about those as well. But they're the ones that are really influenced by the Greeks, kind of carry on that Greek culture. Okay, here's that map that I was telling you about. Okay, so here in orange is Alexander's empire just a little bit before he dies, right? Because he dies in 323. So this is where it begins, and he goes on this conquest and conquers these areas and keeps traveling further east. And these blue arrows show the different routes of his invasions. We can see major battles, a major siege of a city, which means he took. I mean, they're just everywhere, right? Athens, Olympus, Sardis, Gaza, several others. And then it looks kind of like a little Parthenon symbol, or different cities founded by Alexander, and they're everywhere. Everywhere we have Alexandria, right? That's the one that we talked about with the library, where it held 700,000 manuscripts from different scholars. Susa, all over the place. See these different cities founded by Alexander. And so he's very instrumental with spreading Greek culture east. That's very important.